Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. This March 11th. I hope everybody is doing well. I hope everybody is doing well. Well, today's, excuse me, today's topic focuses on what is the actual return on investment of artificial intelligence, AI? And is AI actually profitable? Yes, today I'm going to be speaking on this topic. And for those that are new here, welcome. I am Dr. Lisa, and welcome to my space. And here I speak about all different things that help us to be leaders within society and within the workplace so that we can be CEOs in our lives and CEOs in our careers. Now, I'm speaking from more of an HR mindset, and no, not the HR that you think you know, but the real HR, which focuses on the human aspect and putting the human first. And that is the key if we're going to have a great society and a great workspace, right? So today's topic, as I said, is looking at AI and how AI is beneficial or not beneficial for us. Now, specifically looking at whether it's actually profitable and contributing to a return on investment for us as humans within the workspace. So if it's profitable and beneficial for us, then that means that it is allowing us to be great at what we do so that we can then in turn allow corporations to become more profitable, right? Because remember, the human is the key to business success. The human is what drives profits, which is why the human should always be at the forefront of every strategic decision. And that's what I'm here to help all of us do, not only within society, but also within the workspace. So without further ado, I am going to bring forth statistics and actual research that shows that AI is not necessarily profitable. Why? Because it does not necessarily contribute to us as humans being able to be our best so that we can be our best and allow for success. Which means if nothing can be successful, then that means that it cannot be profitable, right? Because the humans are what drive profitability. And that's something you need to always remember when justifying why we are necessary within the workspace, why our needs and wants and desires must be at the forefront when looking to drive change within the workspace, because we are the key to profits. So without further ado, I came across this article. I think it was, well, not really article, but research results from Berkeley University, which there's always been research coming out and saying how AI is not necessarily profitable because it does not really contribute to us being more productive. But without further ado, let me go ahead and get into the article. Let me change my background so that you guys can find this article as well through Berkeley. Let me get out of the way. AI promised to free up workers' time. UC Berkeley Haas researchers found the opposite. Yes, that is right. Finding out that AI has done the opposite with freeing up workers' time, meaning making us work harder. Making us work harder, which is not what is specifically designed to do. But I'm going to go ahead and read this article. I found this a while ago, but since I was doing my February talks for Black History Month, I pushed it back for the month of March. But let me go ahead and read the article. You can look it up and follow along if you would like, but I know people like when I read, so I'm going to just keep reading on here. I've gotten a lot of compliments about me reading, so thank you, everyone. Without further ado, as I said, the results of this research study were actually published February 18th, which is actually my mom's birthday. February 18th, and I will get started. And the researchers are, I don't want to tear her name up, Maggie Yee and Aruna Ranganathan. All right, and this is actually written by Laura Counts. And I shall begin. AI promised to free up workers' time. UC Berkeley Haas researchers found the opposite. My mouse working. Move a screen over so I can see. Okay. While conducting research on how AI was changing daily work at a U.S. technology company, UC Berkeley Haas doctoral student Maggie Yee noticed a pattern that raised a provocative question. What if AI is intensifying work rather than reducing it? If you use AI, you already know the answer to that. Yee's 8-month ethnographic study, co-authored by Associate Professor Aranya Ranganathan and featured in Harvard Business Review, points to exactly that dynamic. In their observations and interviews with employees of the 200-person company, researchers found that generative AI didn't free up time, it expanded what workers felt capable of and willing to take on. Employees worked at a faster pace, took on a broader scope of tasks, extended more into their work hours of the day, often without being asked to do so. Ye and Ranganathan wrote of their in progress research. What initially felt like excitement, experimentation, and momentum had quietly accumulated into something that was harder to sustain, the study suggests. We asked Yi, PhD, class of 28, I guess. Class of 28. The way it's written is not written right. Class of 28, that's what I'm going to assume it means. To walk us through what she and Ranganathan found, why it should concern employers, and what organizations can do before that cycle takes hold. What sparked this project? We didn't start with a fixed hypothesis about whether AI reduces work or increases it. We simply wanted to understand in a grounded way how generative AI was shaping everyday work practices. As I spent time observing and talking to people, a pattern around work effort began to emerge that didn't quite align with the dominant narrative. That was the point when we realized there was something interesting that to theorize. Can you briefly walk us through your study design and methodology? What were you observing over the past 8 months? Our study is based on an 8-month ethnography at a technological company where employees had broad access to generative AI tools. I was on site regularly, observing work in real time, how people structured their days, how they moved between tasks, which tools they used for different kinds of work, and how those tools fit into their routines, and so on. I attended meetings and participated in everyday conversations to understand how AI was being discussed, normalized, or debated within the organization. In addition, I conducted more than 40 semi-structured interviews across functional groups. In those interviews, I asked people to walk me through their workflows and reflected with them on what changed after AI entered the picture, including what they now attempted that they wouldn't have before, how they allocated their time, and how they felt at the end of the day. This is an in-depth study. Well, it did say that the study was, look me, don't judge me, yo. I think it said 5 months. I can't remember. What sparked the project? We didn't start with a fixed hypothesis about whether AI reduces work or increases it. We simply wanted to understand the grounded way how generative AI was shaping everyday work practices. As I spent time observing and talking to people, a pattern around work effort began to emerge that didn't quite align with the dominant narrative. That was the point when we realized there was something interesting to theorize. Can you briefly walk us through 8 months. It's an 8-month study. You found that AI intensifies work rather than reduces it? What does that look like in practice? What were the main ways you saw this play out? In our study, intensification took 3 main forms in practice. First, people began to take on work that previously would have belonged to someone else. Really? Or might, who's doing that? Or might have been attempted at all. That's very interesting that it made people want to take on other people's work. Ooh. And you're not getting paid to do that? The scope of what counted as my job widened. Second, because AI makes it easy to start and continue tasks, work seeped into moments that used to function as pauses. People would send prompts during lunch, before meetings, or in the evening when an idea came to mind. So that means that you're already working harder than what you need to be. So you're supposed to be eating, right? But you're working. You're doing prompts. You're sending prompts during lunch, before meetings, or because during lunch, that's your you time. So that right there is a red flag for me, for it highlighting how it's seeping into your life. Okay. Meetings, or in the evening when an idea came to mind. This dissolved some of the natural stopping points in the day. Third, workers increasingly kept multiple threads alive at once. They would run AI processes in the background while reviewing code, drafting documents, or attending meetings. Some even ran multiple AI agents simultaneously. This created a rhythm where both the human and the machine were constantly in motion. That's interesting. And we see a lot of people doing that when they do use AI. There have so many tests going on. So in theory, you're you're doing more, you're being more productive, but really you're taking on more work if you really think about it. But we don't view it that way because we feel like we're knocking out so many different things at one time. But I digress. Let me go ahead and keep reading. Some employers might see it as a win that employees are doing more voluntarily. Like I just said, you're volunteering more of your time, and you're free, and you're taking away the time that you have earned because you're working during the lunch hour. Okay. Or doing more work voluntarily. Why should they be concerned about the patterns you observed? I can see why some organizations might see this as a win. If employees are proactively taking on more and moving faster, that can look like the productivity promise being realized. The challenge is that what appears to be productivity boosts in the short run can become harder to sustain, exactly as I said. As task scope expands and multiple AI assisted workflows run parallel, the workday becomes denser and more cognitively demanding. Exactly. Because this expansion often feels self-driven and even exciting at first, expectations can gradually reset. And what was once extra effort becomes standard performance. Exactly. Standard performance. That's where a vicious cycle can form. Increased capability leads to increased output, which leads to higher expectations, which then pressures further expansion. Over time, constant switching and reducing recovery can impair judgment and increase errors, and organizations may struggle to distinguish productivity gains from unsustainable intensity. What most surprised you in these findings? What surprised me most was the contrast between how people describe their moment-to-moment engagement and how they describe their overall experience. In micro moments of prompting, interacting, and experimenting, people talked about momentum in a sense of expanded capability. But when they stepped back and reflected on their broad experience, a different tone sometimes emerged. They describe feeling busier, more stretched, or less able to fully disconnect. And that makes a lot of sense, as I said, because you're working more and you're using more of your free time to work. And so you're volunteering your own time off to do this. So it makes a lot of sense. That contrast suggests that intensification can feel positive in the short bursts that make up the day, while the cumulative effects creates strain over time. You propose the concept of an AI practice as a solution. Can you explain what that means and give some concrete examples of how organizations might implement it? When you talk about building an AI practice, we mean being intentional about the rhythm and boundaries of AI enabled work rather than simply accelerating because the technology makes it possible. In practical terms, that might include building in intentional pauses, brief, structured moments before major decisions to surface a counter argument, or explicitly link a choice to organizational goals. So, speed doesn't crowd out reflection. It also involves sequencing. Instead of reacting to every AI generated output as soon as it appears, teams can batch non urgent updates, protect focus windows, and let work move more in coherent phases rather than constant state of interruption. And finally, it requires human grounding, such as protecting time for check-ins, shared reflection, and dialogue, so work doesn't become entirely solo or tool mediated. The intention is not to slow innovation, but to ensure the productivity gains remain aligned, thoughtful, and sustainable over time. This is very interesting, and I find these findings very interesting because it's highlighting how AI is not necessarily profitable if we're not utilizing it the right way and not limiting how we're utilizing it and structuring it how we're utilizing it. That means that, it may sound like a win for corporations in the beginning because people are literally volunteering their own time to utilize AI, even on their lunchtime, and taking on tasks that normally they would not be taking. That means that you're taking on work that you normally would not be doing. And that means you're getting paid for work that you're not supposed to be doing. So you're taking on all this extra work and you're not even being compensated for it. That is something that needs to be recognized, because it results in more intensified work, and the idea that you're working more efficiently, but really not, because you're taking on more work because you have all of these different processes going on. I find that very interesting, and it highlights why it's important for us to not get so sucked in when it comes to AI. And so the idea is that AI creates less busy work and more high value work, right? And shorter days and better focus. But the evidence shows that it's not. It shows that it didn't reduce work, but intensified work, meaning that employees took on worked at a faster pace and took on broader scopes of tasks, but it pushed into their breaks. It pushed into them taking on tasks that they shouldn't even been doing. And in between moments, they're juggling all these AI threads and these different things all at once and all at the same time. So in the end, you're looking like you're productive, but really you're not, because you have all of these different things going on. You're working during your break times. You're taking on tasks that you're not even being compensated for. And in the end, which results in burnout. And that is not something that's going to really actually help you. And I think that's one thing that we have to understand. We forget that AI is a tool. So it's all about how we utilize this tool. It's not, yeah, this tool is great, but we have to remember it's a tool and it's not something that that replaces us. We're using it so that we're supposed to be more productive. But in the essence of these results, it's showing that people are using it, without limitations, to where they're forgetting to say no. They're taking on all these different tasks, and to the point that they can't even keep up with the tasks that they're taking on. And that shows, even in the results, it says that they're actually 90% slower than the working without them. It's resulting in people being 90% slower than what they were. In essence, but they're believing that they're working 20% faster when really they're not, because you're taking on all this extra work. And I actually found some other statistics as well within other companies that have actually kind of looked at, how AI is being utilized and whether it's being beneficial for them. For example, a PricewaterhouseCoopers CEO survey reported that was for this year, 2026, found that only 56% of companies see no sufficient financial return from their AI investments. That's 56% of companies from the survey found that there was no actual gain from AI. Another study conducted by linked to Atlassian surveyed found that 96% of Fortune 1,000 executives say that AI has failed to deliver on meaningful return on investment, even though the usage has surged. So there's all this data showing that the usage has surged, but we have no actual results. Another global study from S&P Global Data summarized in a 2026 analysis showed that 42% of companies scrapped most of their AI initiatives in 2025, and on an average, 46% of AI proofs of concepts were abandoned before production because they had no return on investment. Another data survey found from CIO cited that only 88% of AI pilots never made it into production. So that's only about 1 in 8 prototypes became an actual operational capability. So it just goes on and on and on. Furthermore, I have some more. So a broader survey cluster around 70 to 90% of enterprises that implemented AI initiatives failed to scale into everyday operations. Furthermore, an MIT reported study found that only about 5% of generative AI pilots delivered sustained value at scale, meaning 95% failed to turn a profit or meaningful business result. That's very similar to all the other findings, about 95%, and you get nothing from it. And they're all echoing the same thing, and it's saying the same thing, and these patterns are coming out. So it's going to be very interesting to find out. And then it says, so furthermore, researchers found, of course, why the return on investment doesn't show up in profits and loss statements for corporations when they are implementing these AI initiatives. So pretty much it's because executives often report productivity gains from AI tools while admitting they cannot tie those gains to measurable revenue growth, cost savings, or margin improvement. That's pretty much because they're not even looking to evaluate or measure it. As I've been saying from my talks from, I think, yesterday and the day before, how businesses are not investing in evaluating to even understand the impact and return on investment of AI. And so they don't even know why there's no return on investment, when obviously the data is there showing that about 95% of the initiatives that are implemented result in 0 profit or return on investment for a corporation. But yet and still, corporations are still pumping millions and billions into the investment of AI. Furthermore, surveys constantly noted that poor data foundations, lack of integration, and weak governance and superficial pilots are primary reasons AI projects never reach scale or pay for themselves. Of course, because there's so much going into building it and not ensuring that it's working or able to integrate into systems, so it can't, there's nothing there for it to really move forward. And furthermore, many organizations count time saved or usage stats as success, thinking that just because time is being saved, that is productivity. Time being saved does not mean that that productivity is contributing to a return on investment. You could be taking on all these different tasks, as the research study has shown, and found that you are stretched thin and still can't perform to your best capability. You are working and taking on more tasks and taking on time away from your actual downtime. So that means you're taking on more hours worked and not being paid for just to utilize AI tools, meaning they are tools. They are not a replacement. Keep that in mind. And that's another reason why there's no real return on investment. And all of this data shows that, yeah, time saved does not mean that there's an actual profit. It just means that it looks like more work is getting done, but is that work even actually accurate and effective as well? See, that's something that is not being measured also. So it's something that must be understood that when taking on all of these tasks, it doesn't mean that it's going to result in a return on investment. You're spending all this time prompting, waiting, reviewing, and fixing AI output. All this time that is lost doing that. It's not guaranteeing that there's going to be a profit for the business. And the study highlights that. All of the statistics that I've just mentioned highlight that. And it's just only time will tell to help to show how all the billions that have been pumped into corporations to implement AI systems are not truly being evaluated properly. And the idea that taking on more tasks is equaling profitability is an illusion, because you're not. You're spending more time working through breaks, taking on other people's time, other people's tasks. And mind you, we're not even getting into, yeah, people are working more and it's more productive, but is that work efficient and effective? That's also something in a question that was not asked within this study, because we forget that you're not just you're relying on this system and these tools, but they also have to be evaluated as well. Hence why people are also working more, because they have to go behind the system and look at the outputs, right? Fixing AI outputs. I think that's one thing that I spend so much of my time on when it comes to AI: the prompting, the waiting, the reviewing, and then going back and critiquing and fixing it. And that's something that you're going to deal with when you're utilizing these types of systems. So it's good to see that there's actually some data out there to highlight how other people are feeling. If you are one that is always utilizing AI in some form of way, I utilize it a lot because I write a lot. So I am all about looking at the return on investment when it comes to AI, and I'm all about helping to bring a face to that and a voice to that, and to ensure that businesses know what they're actually implementing, making sure that people are trained so that they are able to efficiently and effectively utilize AI as well. So there's so much that's going on, and this all boils down to wasted money. That's really what this is. Time wasted, money wasted, workforces being stretched thin, people not even getting paid for the extra efforts and time and work and tasks that they're being taken on. Even so far as the research has said that people were taking on other people's tasks. Now that's just crazy. We're not doing that. We're not taking on other people's work and then not getting compensated. No, we are not doing that. A true leader is not going to be out here taking on tasks while realizing that they're being stretched thin and the tools that they're utilizing are not helping them to be efficient and effective within their business and performing on the job the way that they need to. So the one learning lesson that should be taken from this is that we need to evaluate how employees are feeling. That is the main takeaway from this research, evaluating how employees are feeling about these tools and how these tools are contributing to how they're able to effectively perform on the job, and making sure that people are being compensated for the extra task and work and skills that are necessary to utilize these systems, because it is changing the landscape of how people work. And when you're changing the landscape of how people work and the type of efforts that are being put in and the extra skills that are necessary to use this, that means they need to be compensated fairly. And that is something that needs to be recognized as well when we're looking at AI tools and taking on all these different investments. It's contributing to changing the landscape of the workforce, but also the skills of individuals that are going to be utilizing these tools. So it's a lot of lessons that should be learned from this. And this highlights how we as leaders in our workspaces and in society need to know what is required of us and not take on extra efforts and without being compensated, because that's one thing that really is needing to be highlighted with this. And it's very interesting. This is such a good topic. I will definitely be touching more on it. And it's also highlighting the importance of evaluation and why evaluation is necessary to ensure that the needs of all are met, that we are compensated fairly, that the workspace is restructured and allowing for people to be effective, and also understanding how everyone is being impacted, the business overall, and that contributes down into profits as well. That's why I say, is AI really profitable? Because from the findings of this research, it actually isn't, because it's contributing to more work, more stress, and just confusion really for people that are working, and they're not even being compensated for it. So they're taking on all these extra requirements and not being appreciated and valued for it. So in the end, yes, leadership and corporations may think that they're winning in the end by implementing AI, and they're going to find out that they're not, because it is not enhancing how humans work, but it's actually increasing the requirements and the necessary skills and tasks and time for people to work, which eats into profits. Now, that is something that needs to be recognized. And us as leaders, we have to be able to understand how to say this and champion this recognition within the workspace. And that's what this needs to be done, is to take on the understanding of investing in evaluating and investigating how any solution is implemented within your workspace. And that still will determine how we can level up our systems and how we operate within the workspace and in society as a whole. That takes us speaking up and explaining and not being afraid to say how these systems are hindering how we are moving forward within society and within our workspace. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you find this beneficial. I hope it wasn't too jargon heavy. I hope it wasn't too nerdy. And if you have any questions, please don't forget to reach out. This is actually a really, really good discussion. It's a great way for us to highlight how we as people can ensure that we remain a staple within society and within the workspace when it comes to all of these new technologies, and how they are actually hindering us and not benefiting us, and finding ways to ensure people understand that and highlight ways where we can actually, it can be a benefit for us, so that we don't fall victim to all of the unnecessariness when it comes to utilizing AI tools that result in unneeded tasks and lost productivity time and all of that. We have to find a better way to utilize these systems. Well, until then, I'll be back on tomorrow. If you have any suggestions for any future talks, please don't forget to put it down in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, don't forget to be the change and love yourself and others. Bye.